The next time you're at work or in a busy public space, take a look around you. Are there exit signs lit up above emergency exits? Can you see a fire extinguisher from where you are? If you're in a building with several floors, is there a fire escape? How many exits can you see, and do the doors push outward in an emergency? Overall, you should notice many different safety features that you probably don't even think about. Fire escapes, fire alarms, even fire drills. In 2025, thankfully, these are all normal everyday safety features most people don't even think twice about. But like most things, there were events that forced employers and governing bodies to code safety into our buildings and workplaces. I'm Jordan, and this is Mysterious 51, a channel about true crime, supernatural, and all things mysterious. Today, we're going to learn about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, the deadliest workplace disaster in New York history. The story begins back in 1900, when the shirtwaist became extremely popular. You may ask, what in the world is a shirtwaist? Basically, it was a blouse modeled after a men's button-down shirt that could be worn dressed up or dressed down. It didn't need to be tailored to fit like many other garments that were popular at the time, so it became a big hit. You simply bought it pre-sized, much like we do now. One of, if not the largest factory producing shirtwaists was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory inside the 10-story Ash building in New York City. Once fully going, the factory took up the top 3 floors, 8, 9, and 10, employing mostly young immigrant women as young as 14 years old, but they averaged closer to about 20. The factory was owned by Max Blank and Isaac Harris, who were Russian immigrants that started themselves from the bottom up, eventually going on to own their own factory. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory started in 1900 with only 1 floor, but with the growing popularity of the shirtwaist, soon opened up to 3 floors, employing hundreds of immigrant workers. But it wasn't exactly an ideal work environment. The factory was basically a sweatshop. Employees worked 10 to 12 hours every day with little to no breaks, packed into the rooms, basically on top of each other. And the workers were often locked inside to prevent theft, all for starving wages. But when you're an immigrant and you can't find many jobs, you have to take what you can to support your family. Eventually, enough was enough. A union was formed by the women working in these factories, asking for simple rights like using the restroom, small breaks, a little bit of safety, and higher pay. It ended in a total workers' strike in 1909 called the Uprising of the 20,000. The strike only kind of worked, and it was not an easy feat. They weren't asking for much. They wanted a 52-hour work week instead of 65 plus hours, plus overtime, a 20% pay raise, and improved safety conditions. The strike ended eventually in February of 1910, and more than anything, the garment companies pretty much just gave in to get their employees back and get to production. But they did nothing about the safety of their workers. It was just as abhorrent as it was before the strike. And there were, in fact, safety protocols to follow. There even was a minimal fire code. In fact, this building was brand new and supposedly fireproof from the outside. As if seeing the future, in 1909, Blank and Harris received notice from the fire inspector that they needed to change their ways. But they ignored the notice. You would think, because both Max and Isaac had both started their careers in factories themselves, that they would heed the warning that maybe they would take care of their workers and try to make the place safe. But no. Both Blank and Isaac Harris only cared about money to be made, and that would prove true on March 25th, 1911, when everything went wrong. By all accounts, March 25th was just another day. The end of the day bell rang just after 4:40 on the 8th floor. But it was not just another day. Presumably due to a lit cigarette or possibly a match, a fire broke out. See, there was a no smoking rule in effect in the factory, but it was never really enforced. What was supposed to be a fireproof building turned out to be exactly what the fire inspector predicted: kindling. The fire started in a small bin of scrap fabric, but rows and rows of bins full of flammable fabric mixed with flammable pattern paper, oil from the sewing machines, combined with the wooden tables, wooden chairs, wooden window trims, hanging garments, and strings turned into a sudden blast of flames. There was no sprinkler system. The only fire system they had were several buckets of water stationed randomly throughout the floors, which did absolutely nothing once the flame caught and continued to burn. Even in the panic, the 8th floor workers attempted to notify both the 9th and 10th floor. We know for sure they were able to notify the 10th floor as they began to rally for their safety. But the 9th floor was the busiest and loudest floor, and it's uncertain if they got any notice at all. The 8th floor wasn't as packed as the 9th, and the workers were able to get out through both the stairs and the elevator. The owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, had offices on the 10th floor, and with some of the workers, were able to get up to the roof to safety. Employees of the building next door had seen the fire and were able to get ladders across the two roofs to allow Isaac and Max to cross to safety, as well as the remaining 10th floor workers that had not tried the stairs or the elevator down. The fire escape did not go all the way to the roof. See, back then, elevators were operated by personnel. They aren't automatic as they are now, and these could hold about 12 people. Between the fact that the only other doors to escape had been locked and the crowding from the panic, the elevator operator could only make 4 trips before the last trip proved too much, and it too became a death trap, parts of it melting and falling, sending those workers to their deaths as well. The trapped workers on the 9th floor had little to no choice to escape the fire once they realized it was there. They tried getting out the doors, but they were locked. In the panic, the crowd of several hundred workers shoved against a door that only pulled open, contributing to several hundred deaths in the crowding alone. Some workers tried to slide down the cables from the elevator, but most fell to their death. Now, they did have a fire escape, but it was almost vertical, which was nearly impossible to climb in a dress or a skirt, and it wasn't rated for the amount of people trying to escape, and it too collapsed on itself, falling and killing the people trying to just make it out alive. The fire department arrived in around 10 minutes after the fire started to try and put it out, but somehow they too were ill prepared. The fire department's brand new engines, they only had ladders that extended to the 6th floor, 2 floors short of helping anyone at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. So, not seeing any other way out, workers started to jump. From 8, 9, and possibly 10 stories up, employees of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory kissed one another and said goodbye. and jumped to their death to avoid burning alive from the fire they were trapped in. Lewis Waldman, who'd watched the scene unfold, described it as follows. Word had spread through the east side by some magic of terror that the plant of the Triangle Waste Company was on fire and that several hundred workers were trapped. Horrified and helpless, the crowds, I among them, looked up at the burning building, saw girl after girl appear at the reddened windows, pause for a terrified moment, and then leap to the pavement below to land as a mangled, bloody pulp. This went on for what seemed like a ghastly eternity. Occasionally, a girl who had hesitated too long was licked by pursuing flames and, screaming with clothing and hair ablaze, plunged like a living torch to the street. Life nets held by the firemen were torn by the impact of the falling bodies. The emotions of the crowd were indescribable. Women were hysterical, scores fainted, men wept as, in paroxysms of frenzy, they hurled themselves against the police lines. End quote. The fire was over in just 18 minutes. After pulling the dead from the building and surrounding areas, 49 workers died directly in the fire. 58 jumped to their death. 36 died in the elevator or elevator shaft, and 3 succumbed to injuries at the hospital afterward. 146 souls died at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory that day in 1911 due to sheer negligence. They didn't have enough coffins for them, and many were incredibly difficult to identify for family, only able to identify through hair and belongings. Adding insult to injury, Blank and Harris suffered very, very little consequences for their actions. On April 11th, 1911, Harris and Blank were both indicted for 7 counts of manslaughter for the 146 people that died in their factory. On December 27th of the same year, the jury found them not guilty. 23 families of the employees that died sued for wrongful death. Each of those families got $75, which is equivalent to just over $2,500 today. But that still isn't the worst part. No. The owners of the factory had insurance on the workers and got $400 per worker that died in the fire, and then opened a new factory where the conditions were just as bad. In fact, they were fined for locking the exits again in 1913, and they were fined the minimum $20. But not every single outcome of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was necessarily bad. On just April 2nd of 1911, a resolution was passed in New York City demanding new legislation on workplace safety. In June of that year, the Factory Investigating Commission was created and launched in New York City, enacting 36 brand new laws specifically for factory safety. The first year that the FIC was created, during inspections, it was found that 14 industrial buildings had no fire escape at all, and reported over 200 buildings with similar conditions to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. New laws ensured factories and workplaces have fire extinguishers, sprinkler systems, alarms, no locked doors, and that they were unblocked, and best yet, put a limit on hours able to work. In 1913, the U.S. Department of Labor was created, and these laws began to finally be treated as a federal issue across the whole of the United States. In 1970, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, was established to further workplace safety. And while I know many employees who absolutely hate OSHA, remember this story. OSHA was, in fact, even though created many years after, established directly in relation to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire to keep workers safe. So when you take a look around you, be thankful for the lit exit signs. Be thankful for the sprinkler systems, the fire alarms, the fire escapes, the doors that are not to be blocked at any point, no matter what, so that you can escape in an emergency. Be thankful that you have a workplace that is properly ventilated, that your workplace must provide or ask you to wear personal protective equipment, and that even if there is the smallest spill, a wet floor sign should be put up. 146 people died in one of the worst workplace disasters in U.S. history due to safety negligence, but we learned from their loss. I'm Jordan, and this is Mysterious 51, a channel about true crime, supernatural, workplace disasters, and all things mysterious. Like, subscribe, and follow for more mysterious content.